Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. It's the Last Thing Thrifted Collab, hosted by Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling, Annie of Crafting with Indiana Jones, Shelly of Repurposed My Way, and me. Hi. You're going to find links to the host channels, as well as the playlist in the description box. Let's get into it. I have here a couple of things that a friend dropped off that she no longer wanted. These ornaments, she said they were from the Dollar Tree. They had a little dome section here that I cut off with my chop saw. Didn't need that. So, she also gave me a bag of these wood candle cups. I'm pretty sure that they came from Hobby Lobby. And I had a bit of scrap wood from which I cut 3 wooden circles. We're also going to be using a couple of the Dollar Tree foam cones and some DAZ clay. We'll be constructing a set of finials from these bits and bobs. I'll fix the ornaments to the candle cups with wood glue, which will be our finial heads. I had to cut those domes off of the ornaments because they were just too wide to fit into that cup, but this works perfectly. I cut my foam cone so that the top of it is the same size as the bottom of our candle cups, as the cups are going to sit atop of the cone. And I just used a long serrated knife for this, and I made sure to even it out. We'll be using the wood discs as bases for the finials. Everything will stack together like so. And one finial will be slightly taller than the other one. To achieve this, I'm going to glue 2 of the discs together. And I'll clamp them until they're set. While we wait for the glue to dry, I'm going to add some texture to my cones by scraping some lines into them. These Dollar Tree cones are the smooth foam, not the crunchy kind. So we really need some texture in order for our clay to stick. And I'm going to score both vertically and horizontally. Now for the clay, let's cut a slab and we're going to condition it. This will distribute the moisture, which is going to help prevent cracking as the clay dries. So we're basically just kneading the clay. And I'm going to roll it out nice and thin. And we're going to wrap it around our cone. I'm trimming off the excess, and I'm going to add that excess to the bare spots until the cone is completely covered. I'm going to spritz my clay with some water to smooth some of the obvious bumps. I do want some texture to the cone, so I'm focusing really on, the significant flaws. And I gotta tell you, using the back of a plastic spoon makes this a quick task. My wood base needs some texture for the clay to stick to it, so I'm applying a layer of Joe Sonia texture paste. This will definitely make the clay application much easier. Some people use glue on the surface before they add the clay. I don't really like that because if I want to move the clay around, it can get a little messy. I find this an easier way to do it. And while I have the texture paste handy, I'm going to add a thin layer to the wood cup. I won't add clay to the cup, but the texture will be important for the painting process. The paste on the wood disc is dry, so now we can add our clay. So I've rolled out more clay, which I'm going to drape over the wood, cutting away the overhang and pressing the clay firmly. I'm going to leave the bottom of the base just the bare wood so that it remains level. So, trim off any of the excess clay that might have overlapped. I smooth the sides by lightly dampening the clay and burnishing it with my fingers. Again, I don't mind some bumps, because I want this to have kind of like a stone effect. We're actually going to be painting this to look like cast iron, so we want some imperfections. With wood glue, I'll affix the cone to the base, doing my best to center it. To fill the gap between the two pieces, I'm going to roll a cane of clay. I'm going to scuff both the clay on the cone and the base where the cane will be attached. This is going to help it stick. And here I'm just pressing the clay into place. Having dampened the clay with a brush, I'll use my pointy tool to spread the fresh clay onto the cone and the base. I'm just pulling the clay down and pushing it up, kind of like, well, you've heard me say this before, like spreading peanut butter. I'm also going to use my ball tool occasionally to smooth the area. And once again, I employ that handy spoon as well. This really does help smooth everything out. And I want this to look like it's one solid piece, so I'm going to continue in this manner until I'm happy. And basically, everything I do to this finial is how I'm going to create this second finial. Yeah, so I should have done this before I attached the pieces. Anyway, I'm going to drill a hole in the center of the candle cups so that we can attach a short length of a skewer. This will anchor the cup to the cone. You feel me? Let's make a hole in the top of the cone. And now we can glue the short skewer into the cup. Then the cup to the cone. And again, I'm using wood glue for this. I'll let it set up for about 10 minutes. That should be good enough before we move on to the next part. So now what we're going to do is roll a thin cane of clay to add to the base of the cup where it meets the cone. And then I'm going to wrap the clay around, clip off the excess, and we'll incorporate it just like we did at the base. Now originally I was going to leave the finials just like this, but I decided to add some diamond shapes around the base. So all I did was cut some squares from clay and added them along the edge. I did 2 rows of diamonds for the larger base. These will need to dry overnight before we can finish them, so let's move on to these 2 wood crates. Now these have been around for quite some time by the looks of it. Seems like my friend only paid 45 cents for these at Cape May Wicker. So those were the days, right? So what I'm going to do is give both crates a base coat of ceramic coat charcoal to start. They need 2 coats. I like to use these wee crates and boxes as risers, and I find them quite useful. I have a couple very similar to this, but they're shorter. They're not quite as long as these. Of course, we're going to want to add a vintage flavor, so I'm going to do a wee bit of sanding, mostly to the edges really of both boxes. Once that's done, I'll wipe away all of the dust with a nice damp towel. Pulled out my folk art floating medium, and we're going to use this to create some washes. I'm going to get some of that medium onto my brush, and I have some ceramic coat Hippo Gray here. I'm just going to kind of mix it up so that the Hippo Gray is more on the translucent side, and I'm going to cross hatch across my surface and along the edges of the box. And then I'll wipe back anywhere where I think it needs it. Again, just using a paper towel for this. And I'll continue to cover the entire box until I'm happy with the distress of the Hippo Gray. This time I'm going to mix up another wash with the medium and folk art Pueblo, it looks really bright orange here, but it's really more of a clay color. So same kind of a deal. I'm going to do some cross hatching and I'll wipe it back until I'm happy with the depth of the color. I'm going to do the same thing to the inside of the box. Now, of course, I mostly use these as risers, but just in case I wanted to flip them over, I want the inside to match the exterior. And that's pretty much it for the distressing of the box. The only other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give it 2 coats of clear matte sealer spray. The finials have sat overnight and they're nice and dry and ready to paint. And here you go. This is the slightly taller finial, so you can see it has 2 layers of the diamonds at the bottom. I'll start by giving both finials a coat of Americana ochre yellow. This is a very loose coat. I'm not really worried about total coverage because we're going to do a couple layers of different colors on top. Now that the ochre has dried, I'm going to dry brush it with the Pueblo. And again, not terribly worried if it's patchy, you know what I'm saying? Because we're going to go over top of this again. Now, I personally love the look of rusty cast iron, so this is kind of where I'm going with this. And I'm sure that you've seen a lot of home decor out now, especially for the spring, that has this kind of finish. Generally speaking, I'm not one really to follow trends, but this is a look that I really like, and it just happens to be, one of the trendy things right now. My next layer will be a dry brush of ceramic coat charcoal. For my last layer, I'm going to use my dirty brush, which means it's the one that has the charcoal on it. I'm going to dip it back into the Pueblo, and I'm going to cover the entire surface with a dry brush of that mixed color. And I think you can see it's a very pretty reddish brown color. I really love the finish on this. I think it turned out so nice. I'm very pleased. And of course, everything I did to the one finial, I did to the other. So let's take a final look. Here we have our crate boxes, and you can see I just added a couple of moss balls to the inside of one, and I stacked them on top of each other. Again, normally I would just use these as risers, but this gives you an idea. You could stick whatever you like in there. You know what I'm saying? And next we have our finials. Absolutely love the finish on these. Let me know what you think. I styled them here by putting the taller finial on top of one of those crates, added a couple moss balls, and a terracotta pot. Love this. I think these turned out really elegant, and I love the idea of bringing what could be an outdoor element. You could see these in a garden, am I right? I love bringing that kind of thing into the house. I'm thinking about making maybe some Easter projects with a similar type of finish to them. We'll see. So, I want to thank my co-hosts, Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling, Shelly of Repurposed My Way, Annie of Crafting with Indiana Jones. Please be sure to check out their channels. Links are in the description box. Along with the link to the playlist, you're going to want to check everyone out who's participating. Everybody's fabulous. So go over there and show everybody some love. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. It really does help the channel out, and I truly appreciate it. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.